Please let me
You need to be sure. Can't turn back after crossing this line.
Directors Samuel Gonzalez Jr. and Bridget Smith bring us The Retaliators. This one stars Michael Lombardi and has the acting debut of Papa Roach's Jacoby Shaddix. Now, this on the surface of it might not sound like it's a horror, and it's kind of a cross-genre movie. I'm going to be very vague with my synopsis because I don't want to kind of go too much into the plot here, because I don't want to reveal too much of the story. Suffice to say, it focuses on this pastor called Pastor Bishop. And, you know, he's obviously a man of God. We see him preaching towards the beginning of the movie about, you know, forgiving thy neighbour and things like this. But his family is already having some kind of, some family issues because his wife has died some time ago. And he's got 2 teenage daughters. Now, their family comes afoul of a drug deal gone bad caused by 2 kind of rival biker gangs. And tragedy happens against their family. And it obviously sends Bishop into depression. You know, something bad happens and, you know, he can't cope very well. And obviously the police are involved and there's an investigation about what is kind of going on. And on the flip side of it, these drug dealers and these 2 kind of like biker gangs are having a plot kind of going forward for them as well. And suffice to say, this movie sounds like it's going to be a Death Wish style revenge thriller, and to a degree it is, but it also has horror elements in it as well, which I don't really want to go into. But suffice to say, there is a kind of a horror element that will come into play in the kind of the last act. So that's kind of all I'm going to say about it. So, what can I say that worked in this movie's favour? I have to tell you, this film had plenty of like hardcore oh shit moments, you know, when I was watching it. And I think that the best way to go into this is not knowing too much about it, because let me tell you, this is a winding road of pain and blood, this movie. It goes into very many different kind of like plot twists and kind of different directions, introducing different characters and how they may kind of fit into the bigger picture. And the storyline, for the most part, is very, very good and a thrilling ride. So let's talk about a little bit more detail. I think the acting here is excellent. I think our character of Pastor Bishop, played by Lombardi, is an excellent. You really do feel for this guy, and it's a testament to the acting here, I think, and to the writing, because not just him, you feel even minor characters around them, you know, other members of the family. And then as we go through, you know, there's more things kind of revealed, and it's like there is some brutal stuff that happens in this movie, and I think the movie does an excellent job of making us as the audience, you know, be able to kind of relate to what we're seeing on screen and feel the pain ourselves, because it's filmed and told in a way, even a flashback to a supporting character. You know, we find out that there's something bad has happened, and it's like but you feel it. The movie does a good job of getting those emotional beats. And I've got to say, all of the cast do an excellent job here of making even small parts kind of, you know, have resonance and weight to them. And even kind of our bad guys, this biker gang, I still feel, because you have a surprising amount of screen time with them. They're not just kind of like faceless bad guys. We do get some degree of characterization with them, and you know, and we spend a bit of time with them to kind of get to know, you know, what they're kind of about as well. So you kind of feel like it. The movie also asks the audience some moral questions, and it's one of these films that kind of puts you in the situation of that and asks, what would you do in this situation? If this was kind of presented to you, what would you do? And I think that's great, because it's kind of one of these films that doesn't really present you with a right or wrong answer. It's just a degree of perspective and maybe where you would sit in it. Because every action or inaction might end up having a negative consequence. And, you know, it's kind of like, it's as the film plot progresses and we get to towards the kind of the third act, you know, it does get into some real kind of like, oh God, there is some real kind of difficult decisions ahead. And then the third act, it goes full on in the horror mode. The first two acts of this movie, I would say, play more like your traditional action movie. In actual fact, our main character is made reference that he enjoys movies like Die Hard or Rambo and The Terminator, and he makes a quote of, he says in the film about how those characters all have a one-liner and things like this. And that kind of comes into play a little bit later in the movie. So this, you know, he's positioned as a guy who's, you know, he likes this kind of action movies and that sort of thing. And then in the third act, we have the horror element is introduced, and then we have some very kind of like gruesome kills, some quite effective gore scenes, and you know, quite a high body count when it comes to the end of the day as well. So yeah, I gotta say, I thought this was overall a pretty entertaining movie for the most part. What doesn't work? Okay, again, I'm gonna do this spoiler free, so it's going to seem vague. I think the story, the first 2/3 of this movie, again, they seem like they're kind of a revenge thriller. Then the last act does seem a little out of place because it kind of goes into this horror genre, and it leans more into it than I thought it was going to, based on the kind of the first two acts, because you don't really get that impression of what's kind of going on. And in the third act, yep, it kind of goes on to full on kind of horror mode, without kind of spilling into anything too fantastical, but nonetheless, it's definitely kind of, you know, horror mode. And I have to say that third act, although it's kind of like enjoyable and a kind of a popcorn splatterfest, it's not as intelligent as the first two acts. And I have to say, it does border on a little bit unbelievable, I have to say, at times. Considering, I think, how strong the first two acts were. And it kind of, as the kind of our character is sort of saying these kind of like these action movie cliches, we kind of see a couple of them in that kind of that last act. There is, again, I don't want to sort of spoil anything for you, but there's some questions of morality that I think that are asked of us, and we have a character making a choice within that third act of the movie, and the choice that is made, it might seem like it was a good decision, but the movie then it makes this consequences affect some other people. And that's kind of not really addressed, I feel. It doesn't feel like, it feels like the movie wants to have its cake and eat it. It wants to have a certain moral stance, but also it ends up having some consequences that the movie doesn't really deal with, which I kind of was a little disappointing. And then the thing is, I would say with the first two acts, the only thing I would say here is there are times when this movie feels like it's a music video. Now, as I've mentioned, this actually has not even just the guy from Papa Roach. There's actually other kind of musical, celebrities that will be in this film. And there are certain small sequences to be honest, but nonetheless, there are some sequences where it's kind of filmed, especially where it's kind of playing this kind of like rock music over the top, where it's filmed in a way like a music video. And again, it just kind of seemed out of place to me. Now, this movie does have two directors, so this is why I'm wondering if it does end up having some kind of like jarring styles from time to time. I say the first two acts is little kind of music video sort of sequences that happen, and then the last act is significantly different. And the only other thing I would say, the first two acts, you end up kind of having flashbacks, and it's kind of like, it gets a tad convoluted. You can follow what's going on, but you feel like you're taking a little bit of a detour. Anyway, however, coming back to the positives, to me, those critiques are relatively negative. When you look at the impact of the film as a whole, yes, it does have some issues, I think, story-wise, but I think as a whole, it's such an interesting story, and it's kind of like a film which has a similar themes to what you've seen before, but it's original enough to make this movie an enjoyable, fresh kind of take, with great characterization and great acting. I think as well to say, on top of that, it's also very well shot and has a nice professional kind of production value on top of it as well. Overall, this is definitely a good movie. Yeah, a little bit kind of like dips into some cliches and some silly moments here and there. But overall, if you kind of like your revenge thrillers, but also like horror films, it's not the perfect film for you. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.